Go to Mr. McLean, see what his questions, if they relate.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. And I'm going to ask Ms. Coombs a question here, because in your testimony you talked about repealing Section 67, which relies on the Minister of Industry to make sure that foreign imported goods meet Canadian standards, and you want that portion repealed. And can you tell us what backs up your recommendation there and what effect that would have?
Yes, thank you. So when I appeared before the Senate, I had confirmed to the senators that all the products, both domestically manufactured and imported, have to meet the requirements of CEPA, its various regulations. So the new substance notification, there's 3 sets of regulations for volatile organic compounds, and of course the various chemicals management plan risk management regulations. Those products, of course, all have to meet the Canadian Consumer Product Safety Act and its regulations, the Pest Control Products Act, its regulations, the Food and Drug Act and its regulations, the Competition Bureau's guidelines, and then the Consumer Packaging and Labeling Act. And I think that there wasn't kind of baseline of information provided during the development of that amendment. And so what we're seeing is that this particular requirement is going to be asking Industry Canada, which in our opinion does not have the scientific expertise, legislative tools, consumer products around post-market reporting and policies, et cetera, to address the intent of the amendment. And we think that if there are unsafe products, that we should have Environment Canada and Health Canada, who currently have very robust compliance programs, manage those. So we don't see the need to have Section 67 in this particular
Thank you.
legislation.
Yeah, so you're saying that it is excessive.
We're covered.
It's already covered in other regulations. Yeah. So the industry minister
and
doesn't.
By a very robust. Yes.
Okay.
And
Thank
by
you.
a very robust compliance program. Yeah.
And I've heard a lot from both yourself and other witnesses here that if I can go through the different legislation we have here that needs to be covered by regulation: the Pest Control Act, the Hazardous Products Act, the Food and Drug Act, the Consumer Product Safety Act, the Food Feeds Act, the Seeds Act. And I think there were a few other mentioned here. This is robust regulatory oversight. Let me ask Mr. Affleck here: is there some way of streamlining this so that we can have the same regulatory outcomes without the regulatory burden of you going through several channels on? And if so, what would you recommend streamlining in this bill so that you don't have another costly and burdensome regulatory requirement?
Yeah, I think going back to the originally tabled version of the bill was quite effective at strengthening CEPA, but appropriately, in such a way that it doesn't duplicate what's happening elsewhere. That's really what we want to avoid is duplication or confusion. And I think we just finished as a government a regulatory roadmap strategy through the Treasury Board Secretariat that was designed to detangle some of these. So to retangle would be dangerous. So I think that the idea is that when looking at any amendments to really analyze them and look for are they redundant to existing procedures. And when we look at plant-based biotechnology, we have a 30-year history of success in Canada and then again around the world on the benefits it can provide. So the robust regulatory program has been working quite well to date. And
let me just to kind of put a number on that. You talk about this regulatory burden obviously has a fiscal drag on your industry, on the whole country. Would you be able to put a pin in how much that would actually cost your industry and therefore Canadians?
A good example would be a conventionally bred wheat variety would cost roughly $1 million to bring to market in 7 to 10 years. To bring a genetically modified version of that to market costs $150 million and takes 16 to 19 years. So the regulatory burden is quite significant, and that doesn't mean there shouldn't be the appropriate level that's in a risk basis, which we have now, but continuing to move to streamline that is important. And I think the departments themselves and the appropriate acts are always working towards that streemlining, and we wouldn't want to undo
We'll go to
that.
Mr. Duguid.